Good morning and welcome to our next Friday ACO deep dive webinar. This week we have Mike and Nadine that are going to present here from Prodoscore and show us the integration and any updates. And I know I know in particular there's one update that I just learned about that I'm pretty happy about, and I'll let them talk about that. So with that said, Mike, maybe I'll pass the baton to you, and thank you very much for taking your time to show us what you got.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. So Prodoscore productivity score. So we're a software tie into ACO, and excited to kind of show you something unique today. Hopefully, this is something that we can add to the portfolio and help you kind of position selling more Avaya Cloud Office. Just to give a quick background on myself, prior to joining Prodoscore as a kind of startup pre-revenue, I was a direct sales VP over at Vonage Business and spent most of my career positioning UCaaS and contact center. So I know how important this call is to getting Prodoscore into the ACO ecosystem, talking to the sales engineer. I don't think I'd be at where I am in my career if it wasn't for good sales engineers and helping come up with ways that you can help an organization and think of it. And I know sales reps bring all these kind of challenges, and hopefully Prodoscore can kind of help fit those. So without further ado, let me kind of get started. I definitely want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions or anything along the way, please dive in, raise your hand, or jump in and just ask away. So when we think of Prodoscore and we think of EPM, that's kind of the segment Gartner has put, in Gartner's most recent release in July of 2021. They launched this EPM segment, and EPM stands for Employee Productivity Monitoring. And kind of what we see is kind of this evolution, and we're starting to kind of see that in the business world. I mean, we had the fax machines and then email. I definitely, I was even selling UC when we were selling phones that looked like that. Over the traditional POTS lines and so forth. And now everyone's kind of moving, to the cloud. And I know Avaya's got a lot of business still on-prem and looking to move them to the ACO platform. And then you think of, I remember Benioff in Salesforce, everyone was on Excel spreadsheets. And now it's like second nature that you would have, every organization has CRMs and so forth. And I think, one key kind of component that we talk about with EPM and kind of what the future used to be was, we got a picture of a boss walking around, right? People in the office. And, there was a component of, you managed your people by, walking around the cubes and kind of seeing what's going on to kind of manage productivity. And now kind of where we see and where Gartner has it on the hype cycle, it's still early by all means, but I'm, with working at Prodoscore and through the pandemic and those type of things, I'm really starting to see organizations especially in the last, 60 to 90 days where they're really having to face this challenge. I was even just watching on the news this morning, and I'm out in Chicago and, it was on a local news station about how employees do not want to go back to working in the city. And, how do you ask your boss about, working hybrid, or how do you, just if they're not going to do it, there's plenty of roles out there that will allow you to work remote. So we think, at Prodoscore, when you think of, kind of that flexibility employees want, the leadership still wants accountability. And so we think when you can bring visibility into the employee via EPM, you're able to kind of get best of both worlds, right? The employee can maintain their flexibility and leadership can have, accountability to kind of help mirror those two. So there's where EPM falls on the hype cycle. Gartner sees it at a less than 5% market share right now, but as you can kind of see in the 2 to 5 year window, they see this segment going up much higher. And I think with what the kind of the future of work looks like, these things correlate. These are kind of the conversations that I have when I'm talking to executives. You think of the, experts say hybrid's the future. There's no playbook. This is a big topic for us. And I'm sure it's a topic that you guys discuss with your sales reps and your sales engineers about what a cloud phone system can do for your business, right? In not being tied to the office. And I'm sure you saw more and more of your businesses moving to a cloud phone system, and they're facing those challenges. And now I think the beauty is the technology's there for us to get the hooks into the data via APIs and to kind of pull those things together. Another big thing is the data decisions, the siloed data, right? The beauty of a cloud phone system is you can get the call reporting and you can get those type of things, but you're missing all the other components from a productivity standpoint, right? The ability to tie in the CRM, the Office suite, all of the productivity tools that they might use, like Ring Central messaging or Avaya Cloud Office messaging, those type of applications, to be able to pull all that data into one interface for an employee. And it becomes difficult when people are remote or they're hybrid. You can't really see them. How do you know who's productive, who's almost burning out? Because we see that is our tool is used more for seeing potential burnout, because people working from home are putting in longer hours than what they would traditionally do when they get to the office and then just leave. So you've got the burnout factor, and then also who are the bottom employees that are not holding their weight within a department and putting stress on other folks in the organization. So these are probably the big three drivers that I'm having with kind of C-levels on a daily basis. And I think there's a lot of correlation with that and with ACO and that hybrid approach and seeing how productive, and then also are they utilizing the tools that they're getting. So how do we get the data? And 5-10 years ago, a Prodoscore really couldn't exist. EPM, in a lot of our competitors, when you think of employee productivity monitoring in Gartner's report, almost all the ones we're listed with are agent-based. And what I mean by that is they'll install an agent on the laptop, right? And that'll capture everything that they do on the laptop. Keystrokes, what websites they're on, even if they're not business websites, right? It's going to track if you're on Instagram or YouTube or NBA.com, or, it's going to pull in things that are kind of invasive of what that employee is doing on a laptop. And I think that software, when it comes to telephony, is a big differentiator for us, right? So because of the way that cloud phone systems work, right, they might use the ACO mobile application, right? And they're on phone calls for an hour or 2 hours, or they're jumping on an ACO, meetings, right, from their phone or from an iPad or from a different device, and you miss all that activity being an agent-based model. So agent-based EPM, the biggest way we beat them is the ability to tie into voice via APIs, because you can then truly get the duration of the calls, who they're making those calls to, are they internal, are they external? All of that data is lost in kind of the legacy employee productivity monitoring. And that brings you to Prodoscore. We're 100% cloud-based. We want to tie into all of the applications. For example, Office Suite, it would be 365 or Google Workplace, tie into that application. Any productivity tools they use, like DocuSign or LinkedIn or any of those things that they do from a business perspective. The CRM or the ticketing system like ServiceNow and Salesforce and Dynamics 365, tie into that. And then crucial to the point is the communication side, right? And that's where we can do an API tie into Avaya Cloud Office, and we can pull out the four key pillars to communication at that point, right? And that's the voice, that's the messaging, that's the meetings, and then chat or SMS. We can tie in four different components there. So I'm going to stop for a second. I don't know, Mark, you got a question? Or no, you good? Oh, might have just came off mute for a second. So we tie into all those.
You are
Hey,
mute,
Mike, you're muted now, Mike.
Oh, there we go. All right. So about the beauty of kind of being cloud-based is it runs behind the scenes, right? It's not as invasive as screen recordings or for that end user. What it's just going to do is, Prodoscore is going to authenticate to Avaya Cloud Office and capture all of the data points strictly from there, not touching anything on the end user's perspective. So we take all of this data in, and then we output a Prodoscore, a productivity score. And why we have to score it. And I use the example of the FICO score. If any of us went to go buy a car today, within seconds, the lender is going to make a decision if we're getting that loan or not. And that's why we have to put it to a Prodoscore. We have to be able to take the thousands of things employees do and give you some way to be able to do trending analysis against it, hence the Prodoscore. So that's why I really compare it to the FICO score, is the ability to make quick decisions. I mean, if lenders had to go through 30 years of your financial history, it would take weeks before they knew if you were approved or not. And so we want to bring kind of that visibility into a Prodoscore to give leadership, an indicator into increases, decreases, burnout, unproductivity time, those components. The score, before I get into a quick demo, is it's a 0 to 100. It's not your traditional school score, and we get that a lot, right? Where people are in the 50s and they think they're Fs, right? There's nothing wrong with a 60 or a 65. That's actually a very healthy number. What we see from our behavioral science team when they study companies that we have on Prodoscore is it's almost like clockwork that 10% of organizations are going to have employees fall into the below 40. About 80% of folks are going to fall into the 40 to 75. And then greater than 75 is going to be your top 10%. And you really, you don't want someone scoring in the 80s, 90s, week in and week out. I mean, that means they would be putting in so much more productivity than their peers. There'd be a potential for burnout, right? And potentially losing a top employee. So it just is the radar kind of for employees that are unproductive. It's such a good tool in you to not lose your best resources because you're burning them out because they're overstimulated, overworking. So let me, I think that's all I have here before I kind of show you a working demo of Prodoscore. I don't know if there's any questions or anything before I dive into the demonstration. Okay, beautiful. I'll get right to it then. So the beauty of Prodoscore is the simplicity behind it. So it authenticates and installs in about 5 to 10 minutes. The clients have to be either on Office 365, which I would say most are, or they need to be on Google Workplace. If they're on like a legacy Exchange server, something like Prodoscore can't be implemented. But the beauty is this thing can install from the Microsoft Azure Marketplace or the Google Workplace within minutes. You just go and the super admin authenticates it and you're ready to go. And then everyone's set up via Active Directory to be able to log in. So it's single sign-on for everyone. And the beauty of getting ACO integrated is it once you authenticate with Office 365 or Google Workplace, it's as simple as phone system. Select the phone system, and then you just the admin authenticates it. Its single sign pops up, and then it'll match all the different users with their phone number based off email addresses. So it's only a few minutes to get an application up and running like this. And I'll show you now the type of data in what we show on employees. So I'm going to start at the employee level first. I think it kind of helps being able to see it at the lowest level, and then how all of the data flows up from there. So what we're looking at is we've got Linda here. She's one of my sales professionals. This is a demo instance that we've got, but this is actually her data in a demo instance. And so you've got Linda Tellerico. She's a 65 over the last 7 days. The only real output you're changing on Prodoscore interacting with it is, how much data do you want, right? Last 30 days, I can see Linda's a 66, and that's a 2% increase over, comparing the two periods together. And that's where it's important with the score. We're able to see trends. We're able to see if an employee dropped 20% in productivity or increased 20% productivity, and then can alert the leader of that to kind of take a look under the hood. Think of it almost like a check engine light. So let's say I want to dive into a day so you can kind of start seeing where these scores are coming from. And so our instance is Google Workplace, but a majority of them are probably Microsoft 365. So I'll kind of show you what that would look like, right? You'd have, these are the different components and metrics that we pull into the Prodoscore. So with Office 365, you'd have email activity, you'd have OneDrive activity, which would pull in any documents that they're doing, Excel or PowerPoint. We would capture calendar event time, Teams chat, Teams calls if they were using those applications. In this example, I've got RingCentral meetings, but ACO will pull in identical to these 4 pillars. We'll be able to capture the RingCentral meetings. We'll be able to capture the phone calls and the duration, the SMS, RingCentral team messaging, SharePoint, and then, like I said, all these other ancillary business applications. And you can actually go to prodoscore.com and go integrations. If you came across something where they wanted to manage a certain application with this, you could see a plethora of integrations. I think we're up to about 70 or 80 different integrations that we integrate with, and we're constantly adding the products to that page. So back to my instance.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So RingCentral Meetings was the name of the video conferencing that we used to offer. That was it was our offering, but it was a Zoom engine, and we had switched over to RC Video, which is also it's the only option we have for ACO video. But is that RingCentral Meetings? We still have legacy customers that are still on that, so I would imagine that's why that's there. But do you also integrate with RCV and ACOV?
Yeah, so I have to get with Chrysantos on that. I think it is the new version of it, the new version. But let me take that one down. I know we had a conversation in regards to this, but let me confirm on that. I actually think we pull in both, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
And they worked out a way to capture both as companies were moving to that new platform. But I'll get a good answer for the team here and put it into the to the messaging group.
Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So what we're doing here, so this is a live instance. So you've got all of the different KPIs here, right? And then so you can see throughout the day all of these KPI metrics in these quantities of things, then produce a Prodoscore. And just so we're kind of on the same page, is depending on what role you're in is kind of how the score benchmarks and the algorithm builds itself. So I mean, think about your at Avaya, your sales teams, right? You probably have inside sales teams, and you probably have enterprise sales teams. The inside sales teams, they all probably use the same tools, right? They probably use some type of CRM. They use some type of telephony. They have the same office suite. They just do things differently. The inside sales rep is probably on the phone all day long, right? Versus the enterprise rep is probably on LinkedIn or doing more strategic things or having more meetings. So the Prodoscore benchmarks itself off the role that they're in for an organization, which is important to understand. So it takes all the data and then it visualizes it. And this is where we've won business with RingCentral customers, where they came from the RingCentral app store, and they reached out where they wanted a better way to visualize on a day-to-day basis. Besides, there's tons of analytics and tons of reporting in ACO to get the durations and stuff. But what this client wanted, Marquis Susu, is they really wanted to be able to visualize the phone calls on that given day, right? So we can see here, right, Linda was on the phone for 19 minutes. Instead of just seeing it kind of in an Excel format or seeing the calls, they wanted to kind of visually see when those calls were taking place, right? So I think I've got a better example in here where Linda was making prospecting calls, right? And so you're able to see throughout the day all of the different calls and the duration of when these calls are being made versus just seeing the count, right? They wanted to see how the call was being made and then what takes place while they're on that call. And we see that a lot with our contact center customers, or that use certain contact center platforms, is when people are on the call, what other applications are they doing, right? So if it's let's say it's an ACO customer that's using it for a ticketing solution, right? And they use ServiceNow, for example. A big use case we get there is, you want to, if you just looked at counts of things, you couldn't see how the behavior of that employee. And what they really like about it is they're able to see that, they were on a phone call, and this stems, right? So imagine this phone call went for for an hour. You would see the call goes for an hour. And then underneath there, you would see that they were in service now. They were updating tickets. They were actually slacking someone, right, to help them with that ticket. And they can now see kind of the behaviors that are taking place to be able to handle that incident or ticket versus just kind of looking at everything almost like in a KPI platform of just seeing, the numbers of things. It's hard to visualize, right? So they love the ability to visualize the telephony, the calls, the messaging in a timeline perspective to see what else is taking place while those calls are taking place. I've got a good example. So obviously we use RingCentral here. I had a sales rep, Ashley, right? And if you looked at her duration, you would see 53 minutes here. And you would think okay, that's great, and you'd see the count of a day and you'd see 40. And if you looked at it just like this, you would have thought that was a healthy day, right? But having this type of visibility, I was able to see that she did all 53 of these calls in about 30 minutes, all in a short little window, right? So she was just doing it to kind of pencil whip activity. And I was able to see that just right out of the gate, that it's not as healthy as you can see Linda does, right? Where the calls are being utilized throughout the day. And you're truly able to see how RingCentral is part of our platform to, drive adoption and so forth. I'd say another use case, and this was me personally when I was at Vonage Business, we had Prodoscore there. And when I actually implemented it for the 70 reps, I actually realized that I had a ton of folks that their phone calls were zero on the Vonage Business application. And it was kind of shocking to me. That's what we sell. We should be using that application. And so I would just sit in one-on-ones when I had one-on-ones with them, show me the interface, show me your demo. And it turns out they didn't know their password, right? They didn't know their password. They didn't use it. And you'd be, then you can actually see the next week, the adoption of Vonage Business from a UC side going through that scenario. I started to see the calls and how they were using it. So it really helps from an adoption perspective as well, when you know that that's a tool that you now can have kind of visibility into who's using it, who's not, and those type of things. So it really, really helps from that perspective. So you can see throughout the day, what we see here too, right, is the burnout factor. When I talk to Linda, I keep trying to tell Linda to kind of cool her jets in the evening, right? I mean, I don't know what days, but she, if we look at Linda, a lot of the time she's working past 5 o'clock and she keeps going all the way throughout into the evening hours. And we see that a lot with the remote work and what, people are starting their day and they continue their day. And you can kind of see, look at this, she's cranking at 10:30 at night still, right? And so I can see kind of the behaviors of an employee, where prior, like I said in that example, managing just going around the office was kind of a different scenario. One thing we just, so you got your Prodoscore, right? You can start diving up from a leadership perspective. You're just changing the week over week trends, right? And we can set alerts on these things, right? So I can see that Jesse was up 20% this week over just last week. And so you're able to see those trends of the thousands of things they do. You're able to see Jesse just almost worked an entire day more than he did in the last previous week. So really powerful data to see trending analysis there. And then as you kind of flow up, you're able to see kind of your entire org, and you're able to see those buckets I described earlier. You're able to see your above average, you're within average, and then your potential kind of at-risk employees that are below average. And then you can see kind of the timeline of productivity 30 days compared to 30 days. I'll keep going here. This just launched today. This will be integrated with RingCentral messaging, so GLIP or RingCentral messaging or ACO messaging here shortly. And what this is showing you is how an organization collaborates with each other. So we call it the social network. So you're able to see Nadine here in the middle, and you can see how she works with a lot of the people in the organization. You could see myself here. And you can see the bigger the arrow, the more collaboration between the two. You can click on an employee. We're big Slack users as well. So you can kind of see the sent received. But imagine this, at scale for an organization of 100 folks in a demo perspective, you're able to see kind of where there's potential isolation, potential bottlenecks, So this is kind of next level stuff that we're doing when it comes to communication and how employees are communicating, who's isolated, who's potential bottlenecks. Why is someone, and it's by role based. So it'd be like, why would someone in sales be communicating with someone in development, right? You're able to really kind of see from an overall kind of organization perspective, how things are, communicating and collaborating with each other. So I think this is pretty cool. This will be launched into the ACO messages and stuff shortly. We just launched Slack today, and then I saw the roadmap. We've got GChat and all of them coming here in the next few weeks added into this application. But this is kind of cool to kind of show you how folks are collaborating. Let's see here. Other than that, you got like a manager view. You can see the subordinate scores of the different teams and so forth. I will show you one thing we're building into the dashboard, which I think is kind of cool, especially from like an adoption perspective. I know, when I was at Vonage Business or selling the UC solutions, like it's important to drive adoption early on when you're switching a platform. And we've got some cool stuff that we're building into the advanced reporting, just like we built that social network, where you're actually able to see the different modules and be able to see the adoption levels by role, by department, by user, to be able to see kind of, for example, you can see our phone calls here and the trending analysis of how they're using it. So if it's a new organization that just switched, this could be a very powerful tool to show kind of the adoption of the platform, and not just for the telephony. I think that's easy to get to adopt, but all the other components, right? Are they using the SMS component? Are they using the meetings component? Are they using, the chat and the collaboration component? And you're able to see all those different modules by role, by department, to really see, is there a department that's adopting better than the other, and so forth. So a lot from that perspective. We're also kind of measuring productivity on the different work days, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for different organizations. It's like clockwork. At most organizations, you see a massive drop on Fridays. It seems like, some productivity levels are about half on Fridays. Then you see Monday through Thursday. We actually have one client we did kind of the advanced reporting for, and they were really low on Monday. And I was kind of shocked by this because their week was opposite of what a traditional organization would be. But in talking to their C-level, it was actually their employees are all really young, right? So they must party on Sundays and come in on Mondays. And he's like, yeah, they don't work as hard Monday. And I knew that versus the rest of the week. So it's just really kind of cool analytics you can see for organizations to kind of see productivity and so forth. So that's about all I have. I think I want to save the next 10, 15 minutes for any questions, comments, thoughts, from my perspective.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about maybe some case studies or some wins that you've had with some in different segments and where they found the true value, kind of how it came about during the sales cycle, the conversation? Was it something that the customer was looking for? Was it something that was brought up by the SE, let's say, based on conversations and needs?
Absolutely. So we have a lot that we get. So why I love working with kind of communication partners is the hardest, one of the biggest challenges we face, right, is to get the technology components. When you think of this slide, right, since I don't live on a machine, I need to be able to communicate with certain products to be able to solution Prodoscore. And so there's a lot of scenarios, right, where I can think of one specifically, right, that I'm thinking of, Sales Empowerment Group in Chicago, where they were in an on-prem scenario, right? And so we got in there with Prodoscore because they've got a ton of, they've got remote workers, they've got, and they're real, it's Sales Empowerment Group. It sounds like it is. They're a bunch of business development reps, high volume of activity. And in that scenario, they had an on-premise solution, right? So what we were able to do is kind of in the, kind of going through, they had 365, they were a big Salesforce shop. but they were missing the component for voice. And this is actually one that I brought to RingCentral, right, as a partner of ours, in the fact that I needed to get them hosted, right? I needed to get them to a hosted phone solution so we could tie into the APIs and pull all that data. It was actually a really easy kind of sale because the two went hand in hand, right? To kind of get the visibility, it helped them with their remote employees now in the sales team with to be able to make all the calls via their cell, the soft phones. It was able to really help them. So we were able to actually position them in that solution, and it almost made the sale a lot easier when you kind of have to buy a cloud solution to take advantage of Prodoscore. And so when I think of examples and use cases where I've ran into some trouble, is the Avaya Office, the not the cloud version, but the on-prem, and it kind of gets me in trouble sometimes in that scenario because it's hard for me to get my hooks into that data, right? And so those are perfect opportunities for me to, position them into the Avaya Cloud Office and kind of bring your team in is on those scenarios because it becomes challenging when I can't get the data via the APIs and authenticate it and, in 5 minutes to start collecting all the data and so forth. So that's a good use case, Lawrence, that kind of came up. And that was an easy win for RingCentral. I think they closed it in a few days, just in the fact that they needed to go to the cloud to take advantage of solutions like this. And it worked out really well.
Nice. And maybe some just key points or things for the audience to look out for during their discovery with a customer that might make it seem like you guys are a good fit. I mean, I know that in today's work environment, a lot the hybrid, well, now hybrid, before obviously because of the pandemic, it was forced remote work, but it makes it a lot easier to see this as being a real key integration to have so that employers have visibility to the remote workers. So that in itself would help. But anything else that you can bring up or talk about?
Think, well, the way I was selling UC when I was selling it was off integrations, right? I think that's a huge component, right? I sold tons of bullhorn clients, right, with the integration into our UC, Salesforce clients. And I think where it comes is like the siloed data, right? So this is kind of what we see. And if we're talking to IT, which a lot of the time, my sales engineers would be going with, a lot of the UC deals or contact center deals I ever did, you were dealing with CTOs, VPs of IT, and what requests they're getting a lot, and this is kind of a good question because these are the folks that you'd be talking to, they get a ton of requests now while they're in this hybrid remote workflow is to provide me the data, right? And so this is where this silo data comes, is when you see in Prodoscore, so you think about it, you've got Office 365, let's say ACO for their phone system, and let's say Salesforce. They can go get all that data, right? And sometimes they ask the IT director, and this is a big use case we get all the time when we talk to IT, is HR is going to IT and saying, pull their emails for me, pull the activity when they're logging in, when they're not, right? Then you can go into RingCentral, pull all that data down, or ACO, you can pull in all the voice components there. Then you can go into Salesforce and grab all the reports there. Everything in Prodoscore is already there. I'm not looking at if you're on Instagram or if you're on YouTube. We only look at the business applications, and all that data is accessible by IT. And what we're seeing is they're getting a ton of requests flooding in this hybrid work model where people are working remote and they want to see kind of those activity and those key KPIs with HR. And so when you think about that, this kind of puts all of that in one pane of view. So almost think of Prodoscore like a Microsoft BI, a Looker, a Tableau. I mean, we're just taking data that's already there for all of these employees and giving you a way to visualize it and digest it easily. So that would be, I think a conversation that would come up with IT and the folks is, in regards to, wanting more of the data and it not being siloed and giving leadership an easy way to see it and not just IT always having to go back and spend time pulling reports on certain folks.
Got it. All right, good. Anyone have any other questions? Any comments? What do you guys think of the integration?
Great stuff, Lawrence.
Okay, well, please join the GLIP team, and if you see a need where you'd like to have Mike or the team from Prodoscore either answer questions or conduct a demo with one of your customers, go ahead and reach out to them. And I will go ahead and post the recording in that group. And I don't know, Mike, if you had a slide deck or presentation that you
we put that in there for you as well. Yeah, so it has some of the screenshots and so forth, so they can show it. It's a very relevant conversation these days. I tell you, we just closed one of the largest government agencies in the country. In the state wants all their people back into the city, and this was a pro-employee initiative where it was funny. Every employee, were all the salespeople for this opportunity because they wanted the flexibility. And so this push and pull is so relevant today that I think it can really help us sell a lot of UC and upgrade some of those on-prems to the cloud, and bolt this on to add some value to those organizations. But I really appreciate everyone's time today.
Great job, Mike. Thank you for joining.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you very
everyone.
much. Great information.
Good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike.
All right. Talk to you guys. Thanks, everyone.
take
Bye-bye.
care.